All right, today we're going to get right to the heart of it, the very core of why we do the things we do. We're talking about unlocking the hidden patterns that run our lives with an introduction to something called schema therapy. So let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like you're just stuck in a loop? Maybe it's in your relationships, your job, or even just inside your own head. The same old situations, the same feelings, just playing out over and over again? Well, there's probably a really good reason for that feeling. What if I told you that your past isn't just a bunch of old memories? What if it's actually, right now, drawing the map for your present and your future? And most of the time, you don't even know what's happening? So that's the big question, right? Why? Why on earth do we repeat behaviors even when we know they're not good for us? Let's dive into these unseen patterns in life. The wild thing is, for most of us, our daily reactions, our big life choices, they're being guided by these patterns that were set in stone decades ago, way back when we were kids. We're basically following these invisible scripts, and we don't even realize we're the actors. And a really great way to think about these patterns, or schemas as we'll call them, is to imagine them like emotional lenses. They're not just thoughts, they are these powerful filters that literally change the color of how you see yourself, how you read other people's intentions, and what you think is even possible for you in the world. Okay, so we've called them patterns, scripts, lenses. But what is a schema really? Let's take a look at the brain's old blueprints. So a schema, it's this really deep-seated belief and feeling you have about yourself and the world. It's not just some random thought. It's a powerful core theme that gets wired into us during our earliest years. Think of those persistent feelings like, I'm not good enough, or I'm always going to get left behind. And here's the kicker. A schema's power doesn't come from it being true. In fact, most of them are totally distorted. No, their power comes from being learned so early, when our brains were just trying to make sense of everything, creating a map to help us survive. And this is where it gets really fascinating, right down at the neurological level. Your brain doesn't just file these early emotional lessons away as old memories. It treats them as permanent reality, as fundamental, unshakable truths about how the world works. Okay, so we've got a handle on what they are. But how do these old blueprints actually pop up in our daily lives? Let's explore their hidden influence, because it's everywhere. Well, whenever a schema gets triggered, we usually fall back on one of three main coping styles. First up, you've got surrender, where you just accept the schema as fact and, for example, keep dating people who are critical of you. Then there's avoidance. You might, say, duck out of promotions at work just to avoid any chance of failure. And finally, there's overcompensation, where you fight the schema by doing the exact opposite, like becoming an extreme workaholic to prove you're not a failure. Wow. That is just such a powerful way to put it, right? Emotional time travel. When a schema gets activated, a simple comment in an adult meeting can suddenly make you feel and react with all the intensity and vulnerability of your 8-year-old self. Your logical adult brain just kind of takes a backseat. And you see this play out in relationships all the time. You might be convinced the problem is your partner and their annoying habit, but underneath all that, your schema is screaming, turning a simple disagreement into a painful replay of some deep childhood wound. Okay, but here's where it gets a little counterintuitive. You might think this is all about struggle and pain, but that's not the full picture. Sometimes these deep-seated patterns can actually hide behind what looks like amazing success. Take a classic high achiever, for example. On the outside, they look driven and passionate, but underneath, they could be overcompensating for a schema that tells them they're a failure. Or maybe they're driven by this core belief that they have to meet these unrelenting standards just to be worthy of love. The success is very real, but the engine driving it is a wound. So if any of this is starting to sound a little familiar, well, you're definitely not alone. Research shows that most of us are walking around with about 3 to 5 of these dominant schemas quietly running the show. It's really just a fundamental part of being human. So, if pretty much all of us have these patterns, what can we actually do about it? Well, that brings us to healing. And when we talk about healing your inner child in schema therapy, we're not just being poetic, it's actually neurological. So what does that mean exactly? It means the inner child isn't just some fluffy metaphor for your memories. It's the name for the actual emotional networks in your brain that fire up when you're under stress. So healing isn't just about talking things through. It's about actually rewiring your brain. See, the goal here isn't just to change your thoughts, it goes way deeper than that. It's about healing those original unmet needs from childhood, and this has to happen on three different levels. Emotionally, by actually feeling and processing the old pain; cognitively, by challenging the old beliefs; and experientially, by creating new, healthier experiences for yourself right here in the present. And all of that leads us right here to our final section, which is, honestly, it's the whole point of this work. It's about moving from a life of automatic reaction to a life of conscious choice. Now, it's really important to get this straight. Healing a schema doesn't mean you just forget what happened. The memories don't get wiped clean, and the past doesn't just vanish. No, instead, what the healing process does is it weakens its emotional charge. The memory might still be there, but it just doesn't have that same power to hijack you anymore. The trigger gets disarmed. And when that emotional charge fades, something pretty incredible happens. A little bit of space opens up between the trigger and your response. And in that tiny bit of space, you're no longer just reacting on autopilot. You finally have the freedom to choose. You know, if you think about it, your old patterns are kind of like a story that was written for you a long time ago. Healing is what finally hands the pen back to you. It gives you the power to become the author of your own life. And that really just leaves us with one last question to think about. What new story will you choose to write?